Okay. All right. All right. We're gonna get started. I think we're gonna get started. So we have a couple people on the YouTube channel. So and we have some folks on Zoom. So welcome to May's meetup for DataWorks Maryland. This is our first blockchain related meetup, so I'm very excited. I met Mike a couple years ago and he's done some amazing things. I think you'll enjoy his story and learn everything that he's built. As I've done in the past, or as we've done the past few, I'll capture questions in chat. So I'm monitoring the Zoom chat and I'm also monitoring the YouTube chat. So there's live there. So if you ask your question, I'll take it and I'll ask them at the end to Mike. And this seems to work pretty well. Like I mentioned, it is streaming live to YouTube. So if you have anybody you want to share it with, just send them the link and they can look at it. Before we get started, I usually just like to thank our partners and just go through some of the logistics real quick. So DataWorks Maryland, this is our May event. To get started, Baron is one of our sponsors. They've been with us for several years. They're a defense contracting company doing software engineering, system engineering. With COVID, I think they're probably still operating to some work, but it's kind of difficult right now. But if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me and I can put you in touch with them. Clarity is another small business defense contracting company doing data science and software engineering, system engineering, a little smaller, but doing some amazing things. So if you're interested in them, just let me know. ICF is a larger company, around 7,000 folks, a little more diverse. They do some things out in California. They do some commercial work, some other government agencies beyond defense. They do a lot of data science, cybersecurity. They're still working pretty well. I have some friends there and they're doing a lot of remote work. So it's kind of interesting. So if you're interested in learning more, let me know. And then Areas Ventures is my company. We're really small. We're doing all the above that I mentioned, defense contracting. If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, let me know. And then just some quick announcements. We have the newsletter that goes out each month. You can sign up at news.dataworksmd.org. We're trying to put more information on LinkedIn and Facebook, just interesting articles. I've been in conversations with some members. Daniel, he's on the line about potentially starting a study group or a project group. We're really just trying to figure out how we would even do that. So if you're interested, reach out. We started a Slack channel for those that are interested. I'm working on getting the June meetup up and going. That's going to be on big data pipelines or big data architectures. So really interesting. The gentleman has set up massive things to do data ingest and works completely remote. So you can do it all through AWS and stuff like that. That's really it. At that point, let's start introducing Mike. So Mike, Mike has 20-year experience as full stack. And what's interesting about Mike, in my opinion, is he left a cozy job and entered the world of startups and blockchain, and he's been successful. So it's kind of interesting, right? Last meetup, we had another person that was kind of doing their own thing in Noah, and he was talking about building products and being more than just an employee. And I think Mike really resonates or really demonstrates that. So I think everyone will enjoy hearing about the technology and really understanding his path and his career. So with that, Mike, you can share your screen. I'll mute myself and you can take over.
All right, cool. Can you see what I want to do here? Okay, let me go to the presentation. Let me make this wider. There we go. And present. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the intro. Yeah, basically, we're going to talk about blockchain, obviously, but more specifically, I think we'll focus on like what it means to integrate blockchain into a traditional web app, and really why blockchain should matter to traditional web developers or enterprise developers. So, one of the, so who am I? Mike Kuhn. Like Jason said, I've been a full stack developer for, more than 20 years. I started in the enterprise. Most of my career was in the enterprise, doing, big data, analytics, streaming, automation, DevOps, but it was pretty much anything that needed to get done, I could do it. And in 2017, I found blockchain, and it really resonated with me. I thought it was just compelling what the ecosystems were all about, and I decided to pivot and go full time developing. Exploring mostly. Most of the time was exploring, doing some consulting, and just learning as much as I could. And then about 8 months ago, we built a platform called BUIDLHub, which is really about integrating traditional web networks and blockchain networks, which really is the crux of why I'm doing the talk. And the truth is that we built BUIDLHub. I mean, I built it because I wanted to give my old enterprise colleagues a way to sort of play with blockchain without having to make this deep technical commitment to it. And one of the questions that I always get asked by my old colleagues, like, why would I use this thing, right? I mean, I'm in an enterprise, it's all isolated. Why would I care about blockchain, or what's its primary purpose? Why do people use it? So, I think if there's a ton of marketing material out there about blockchain, and it's a lot of hype. But I think it boils down to really two things: gatekeepers and ground truth. And what I mean by this is, today our lives are all, we're online a lot. Most of the things and the tools and the data that I rely on, it's online, like banking, email, social media, right? All of those platforms I sort of use on a daily basis as part of my business and part of my personal life. So the question becomes, like, will those things always be there for me? And more importantly, my data, my information, my history is stored in these platforms. So will that always be available? How much can I really trust that information is always going to be there? And as an example, like, I was in the military, and I was also a government employee for a while. And I converted my my military service time to civilian service time for, retirement benefits. And I got an email from OPM saying, okay, you're good to go. And that's really the only record I have that I actually transferred that time. So 20 or so years from now, when I decide to retire, are they going to be there? Are the records going to be there? I have no idea. And it's because it's sort of locked away into that siloed repository that I have no visibility into. I can't fully trust that OPM is going to get it right. And at the same time, there's this, we all know AI is making tremendous strides in making it almost impossible to discern what's real and what's fabricated. Fake news, online content, fake videos, even identity. Like, I think it was the CES Consumer Electronics Show last year, maybe, where people were walking up to this monitor and they started to talk and gesture, and the machine essentially mimicked a movie star face and voice, and basically repeated what the person was doing, but it was completely looked like the actor or actress was doing it. So impersonations are going to be hard to discern moving forward. So, the question is, how much of this information and how much of this ecosystem, the existing products that we rely on, how much do we trust this? And of course, this is where all of the blockchain zealots will jump in and say, that's what blockchain does. It'll help us. It'll save the day. Maybe. I like to be a little bit more pragmatic about it and just look at, like, fundamentally, why would I use, or what problem does blockchain really solve? And I'm a toolbox guy, so I like to know, if I'm solving a technical problem, what tool do I actually need to apply to that problem? So fundamentally, I think blockchain is about automating an agreement on what ground truth really is. And you'll see all of these blockchain networks. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of them, and they're all basically doing similar things around establishing ground truth of some thing that they want to agree on. The first killer app is obviously money, but there's a lot more going on than just money. But all these networks, they vary based on the algorithms they use to come to consensus on what ground truth is, and then what exactly, truth they're actually agreeing on. That's sort of what makes them unique. And there's a lot of these networks, and you can dig really deep on this into this, just distributed ledger technologies. There are permission chains, there are public blockchains, there's higher order chains. There's a lot going on, and we're just going to focus on one thing during this talk, and that's the public blockchain space, and specifically Ethereum. So I've already used the word several times, so I might as well give you sort of the simplest definition I could possibly come up with. And when it all boils down to, blockchain is just a record-keeping system. And I could stop right there and say that's really all it is. But what makes this record-keeping system a little bit different is that every record in this system is linked together by information in each previous record. So what that means is, if I wanted to modify one of the records in this record-keeping system, I would have to modify every record, because they all contain a little bit of information from each one. And what makes it secure is that the longer the chain gets, the harder it is to rewrite history. Meaning, if I need to recompute all of the links in the chain, well, new data is being added at the same time, which means I'd have to rewrite everything again. So again, the longer it gets, the more secure it is. So fundamentally, that's all blockchain is. It's just this record-keeping system that is very hard to manipulate and change. And why this is fascinating is because really, blockchain as a movement, as a culture, as a ideology or whatever, it's kind of this big social engineering experiment where there's game theory, there's financial incentive, but it's really around how do we all come to agreement on what that ground truth thing is, whatever the records in the system. How do we all agree on what those are, and how do we sort of incentivize the network and the actors in a way that benefits the entire network and the ecosystem. So it's very interesting. And when you look at it from this perspective, and when you get past all of the cryptography and the math and all the complexity in the tech, there's some interesting possibilities that arise. If you just trust the technology, and you trust that, and you just look at it as this record-keeping system that you can trust, then it sort of starts to answer those earlier concerns. Like, okay, if software today is controlled by central authorities and I might be locked out for some reason, can we get rid of that? Can we get rid of the gatekeepers and just have it always available forever? And more importantly, the data that's stored there, could that be always available even beyond my lifetime? That starts to create possibilities about, wow, this is more than just money. And then, authenticating data, where was its origin? Who authored it? Are there witnesses that it can attest to the truth or the factuality of a piece of information? Can we use blockchain for that? Personal identity, there's a great example. If I go to a bar and I have to verify that I'm old enough to drink, I give my driver's license. But it's giving them more than my age. They have my driver's license number, they've got my address. There's just a lot more leakage going on in identifying who we are, and maybe blockchain could address some of this. And that's really a key point I want to convey, is that blockchain is really about providing access to some ground truth around the things that we use today, but also ensuring that that access and data exists well into the future. That's really what it's all about. Okay, so I'm going to dive into details and do a demo and everything, and I'm probably going to start throwing out jargon and terms that it's natural for me now, but in the beginning I had no idea, and you probably won't have any idea either. So we're talking about blockchain. So what is a block? Block is just a collection of transactions, and a transaction is basically, it's an exchange between one or more parties, some interaction. And the details of a block and transaction are basically encoded according to what the network protocol says, how it should be encoded. And then every network has this concept of a miner. And the miner is responsible for making these blocks and verifying that transactions are legitimate, and then publishing the blocks as time goes on. You'll probably hear me talk about a wallet or an address. And I remember that when I first started, the whole concept of a wallet was a little confusing because it was so heavily focused on the software part of the wallet. But at the end of the day, the wallet is just a public-private key pair. I could write down my private key on a piece of paper. That's a paper wallet. It's totally legit because fundamentally, as long as I could reproduce the private key, I always have access to the information on blockchain. The software just makes access easier. That's really all it is. And an address, so again, going back that it's this sort of record keeping system, each entry in the system, in the ledger, is an address. And that address is derived from the public part of the public-private key pair. And then the private key is used to cryptographically sign every transaction. And that just means that given a signature, I can reverse it to determine what's the public address or owner of the address. And that's how miners work. They're watching these transactions and verifying that signatures are legitimate and balances are correct and all of that. So that's all a wallet and addresses are. I'm going to talk about smart contracts specifically in the context of Ethereum. So in addition to like exchanging money or crypto, I can also exchange code. So smart contracts are really just code that is stored on chain forever, which means the software is always accessible. And to interact with that software, I send transactions in order to manipulate these state variables. So really, smart contracts are sort of this mechanism like a big giant state machine. And in order to move between the different states, I have to send it transactions. And smart contract might be a little bit of a misnomer because they're not really smart at all. They can't reach out to the internet and pull data in and do any kind of crazy computation. The only thing they can do is interpret what's sent to them. So if you want data to be like part of a decision on what to do in a smart contract, you need to send it the data. So that's really what smart contracts are. I'm going to make mention of a token, and you'll hear about tokens a lot when you talk about blockchain and crypto and everything. And a token is just a digital asset, and the digital asset where we can verify who owns the asset on a public blockchain or private, I guess. And then the smart contracts are what issue and manage the ownership of those tokens. The most popular platform by far doing this is Ethereum, but now most of the blockchain networks have some form of token or another. You'll hear mention of the most popular standards for tokens is ERC-20 and ERC-721. ERC-20 is fungible tokens. So fungible just means like a dime is worth 10 cents no matter what dime you have in your pocket. They're all worth exactly the same, unless it's some rare coin thing, but that's different. Then there's non-fungible tokens. It's just the opposite of that. Every dime or token has unique characteristics that make it more or less valuable than other tokens. And this is a really interesting type of token, and we're going to dive deeper into this. But right now, a lot of gamers and a lot of blockchain games use non-fungible tokens to represent characters, weapons, armor. But there's so much more going on with that standard, and we'll dive into that a little deeper. Okay, so just to wrap up all the terminology, you got blockchains. They're just protocol networks that agree on contents of a block, which is transactions that represent exchanges between addresses that hold tokens or code representing smart contracts. Simple, right? Let's see. Okay, so another question my old colleagues ask, this is emerging tech. Is it really ready for mainstream? There's all kinds of stories about scalability problems and security, and do we really trust it yet? So I would say, in terms of maturity, it's kind of like, and I'm going to make a lot of analogies to early internet, and it's an appropriate analogy because very much what's happening in blockchain today is sort of the same way that that the internet was sort of incubated and grown from a very developer techie centric origin to what it is today. And I would say that where blockchain is, it's kind of like trying to interpret a website by just reading the raw HTML. You can do it, but why the hell would you? It's just so much friction to try to understand what's going on. But that's sort of where we are. Now it's getting better. They're making a lot of strides on the user experience and the onboarding. But it's you know, it's an emerging process. And it's an evolving ecosystem. It's constantly changing. And many of the changes going on are breaking changes. For example, I was consulting in a project in Berlin, and the underlying tech we were using, the software we were using, it had like 3 or 4 changes that totally broke what we were doing in the process of building this app. So, you know, it's a moving target. And it does require a tremendous amount of technical knowledge just to engage. You know, it is very much catered to developers and the do-it-yourselfers, very much like the early internet. You know, and then, you know, is it compatible with current tech stack or, you know, current libraries? And I would say, you know, every network, including Ethereum and Bitcoin and all of them, they have their own protocol and their own data structures. And again, going back to the early internet, there were standards that were evolving. They didn't have standards at certain points in history. So you had sort of isolated networks. That's basically what you're seeing in blockchain. And there's an ongoing attempt to try to support sort of cross-chain communication. But imagine the internet without TCP or HTTP. That's what we have today in blockchain. It's very difficult. You know, you have to build these bridges that translate one for the other. And all of them require sort of specialized software or nodes that are able to connect to the various blockchains and communicate. You know, and then for a data science community like this, you know, how do I just get access to the data and start playing with it, start analyzing it? Well, you kind of need some insider knowledge. You know, there's no DNS equivalent to just say, oh, contract.com. There's no DNS. There's an evolving one called ENS, Ethereum Naming Service, but it's very, very early, and it's just continues to change. And it's not like you can just point your browser at a smart contract or an address or something and start interacting with it. You can using some of these platforms, these middleware platforms that sort of translate it for you. But if you want a direct contact or connection to the blockchain, you can't go through a browser. And then every app in these networks, it's a snowflake. Each one, it has its own special encoding, its own sort of API, its own rules. So you kind of have to know about what you're interacting with before you can kind of interact with it. Again, there are really no standards. So I would say, you know, if you want to move forward and build things and prototype and sort of try blockchain, there's some mitigation strategies you can use here. Like, you know, in terms of maturity, abstraction is critical. Like, don't do what we did in Berlin and sort of riddle your code base with direct coupling to blockchain libraries. That was a nightmare. So definitely isolate the code to just your core capability, and then, you know, abstract the blockchain pieces out. Expect and budget for changes. Definitely, like, your schedule will be impacted when, you know, some library that you depend on changes, and it's a breaking change. So budget that into the time. And I would say, you know, there's a reason that a lot of pilots and prototypes are going on right now, and it's because, you know, it's still very much immature. So as long as you're doing things that are not part of the core mission, in order to experiment and prototype and understand what's possible, that's a safe road to go on. I would not tie this yet to a core mission capability. It's getting there, and it will become that, but we're still early. In terms of compatibility, choose a blockchain solution that sort of aligns to your problem. You know, all those blockchains are agreeing on ground truth that's meaningful to the community that's running that particular network. So kind of align your problem to that network. And really, I would say you got to keep up with what's going on. It's a hard problem because this is a fast moving target. So relying on third-party services right now until standards are sort of settled makes a lot of sense for sort of prototyping. For data access, you kind of need to know what you're looking at. So you're going to have to find specific smart contracts or applications, understand how to interact with them, understand the encoding. You can rely on tools like Remix and then BUIDLHub, which we'll get into at the end. But there's ways you could start to play without making a deep commitment, as long as there's buffers in place. All right, that being said, like, all right, we've covered like, all right, it's basically about ground truth and always having access to data. It's just a record keeping system, and there are some challenges if you want to like actually use it. So what's practical right now? Like why, or what cases, what are the use cases I could use to try and pilot or try something out? And there's a ton of examples out there on the internet, but I'll just say that I called out a few of them here that I think are important. Like access control is very, very hot right now. Basically using blockchain to verify that you have access to some resource, be it physical resources, electronic locks, software resources, platforms, even like proving you attended something. We're going to get into this POAP project called it's Proof of Attendance Protocol, basically proving that you attended a conference or training. Subscriptions, online subscriptions, lots going on with access control, and we'll dive deeper into that one. Supply chain, very, very popular for blockchain solution. Both Walmart and Dole are really big into this. Dole actually put out a TV commercial to just mainstream public talking about how they're using blockchain to guarantee freshness of produce from farm to shelf. And what's interesting to me and really compelling about this commercial is that, I mean, they're presenting a very technical subject, a deeply technical subject like blockchain to the mainstream people that, but yet they're changing this, I guess, the mental association with blockchain to something good. Usually when we hear blockchain, it's about, you know, hackers, criminals and scams and all of this, but this is actually evolving to something that is going to change the way people see blockchain as a useful tool to assure them that things are being done correctly behind the scenes. So I think it's very compelling. And the only other one I'm going to really talk about now is the employee stock option plan. So we talk about these tokens. Another thing that is very popular around blockchain, and there's a lot of media around this, is the token sales. You know, instead of companies raising money through an IPO, they raise money through this ICO, initial coin offering. And there were a ton of scams because what they did, and some of them are still doing, is they're selling these tokens to raise money to build something. So they're raising money before the product actually exists. A ton of scams going on here. But the reason I'm calling this one out is because it is possible, and there are companies doing or projects doing this, where employees get ownership of the company they work for through crypto tokens, almost like private equity within the company. The reason I call this one out is because more than what's happening right now and today, and take a company like BUIDLHub, like we're still very young. And as we move forward, we kind of have to look not just at the people that are on the team now, but the people that will be on the team 5, 10, 15 years from now. What are they going to expect? You know, there's an article put out, I think it was Forbes or somebody, probably get it wrong, but it was talking about the composition of retirement portfolios for the different generations. And I'm a Gen Xer, and it said that, you know, on average, only 2% of retirement portfolios for Gen Xers have crypto, which makes sense because when I entered the workforce, I only had one option: stock. I had mutual funds. That's all I had. That's what the 401k offered, and that's what I had to take. So it makes sense that the bulk of what I'm sort of committed to is traditional investment. But that's not necessarily the case for people entering the workforce today, or people that are in middle school or high school today. When they enter the workforce, they're entering in a world where there's a whole lot more options, and crypto is one of them. And this study was basically saying that, the younger generations have a much higher percentage of crypto in their portfolio. Now, I'm saying this because from the enterprise perspective, if if you want to attract new talent and they come into the workforce with this expectation that they're going to have this flexibility that crypto and everything offers them, then you probably want to consider offering something in the crypto realm. Like if you said, well, our ESOP program is actually based on an ERC20 token, you've now caught their attention. You're the type of company that will appeal to that type of employee. So this is the kind of thing that's happening. It's sort of this slow shift that will evolve over time. Okay, enough of that. Let's dive into access control. So what's interesting about these non-fungible tokens that I mentioned earlier is that they have characteristics or metadata attached to them, or they can. And if we think about these tokens in terms of controlling access, well, we could use this metadata to do things like set an expiration time on a subscription, or set certain permissions or roles based on the NFT, or unlock features to a software platform based on what's contained in the NFT. What's interesting about this is that we don't need to deeply invest in like this whole Microsoft enterprise solution that's extremely expensive to a small company. What all we really need to do is record on chain that someone owns one of these NFTs with the certain privileges. And as long as we can read that blockchain, then we know what permissions the person has. I don't need any custom enterprise solution to do that. I need middleware to be able to read the blockchain, but that's a lot cheaper than this really deep investment. And we're going to go through a real world example of this where we're going to use these NFTs to control access to private chat channels in this Discord server. So chatbots kind of switch gears a little bit because it's relevant to the demo that'll come up later. But if you're not familiar with chatbots, they're basically like pieces of software that sit in these chat rooms, and they watch messages going back and forth to whoever's chatting in the room. And their intent is to keep the room clean. Like they'll remove certain images, like if somebody's posting porn or something, or bad language or whatever. It's just to keep the room, a safe place to interact. But they also allow people to make requests to them or commands. So you can ask it questions and it will respond. Why this is interesting is because it makes it possible to use these chatbots as middleware between the chat platform itself and blockchain. And this is basically what we're going to show a little bit later. And Discord is interesting specifically because it's so popular with gamers and blockchain developers. And the way it's organized is that Discord has these servers. And the server is essentially what creates a chat group. And within that group, there are many, many channels. And the channels can be private so that you can have only certain people with certain roles actually be able to interact in these rooms. So when you combine these ideas, you've got the non-fungible token with all of its metadata and characteristics for access control with this middleware bot. It's possible then to use the bot and what's written on chain to verify and give people access to certain resources. And in this case, it's a channel in Discord. So this project called Proof of Attendance Protocol, or POAP, they approached BUIDLHub for this very reason, because we make it possible to build these Discord and Telegram chatbots. We automate the whole process without any code. And they said, well, can we use that to essentially verify these POAP badge owners and give them access to these channels? And very briefly, what POAP offers is it's like if you go to a conference, and mostly blockchain conferences, they would give you this physical badge, although today they're giving virtual badges. And then on the back of the badge is a QR code. You scan that QR code with your phone, and it writes on blockchain that you own this badge, which proves that you were physically at the event. It's the only way you could have gotten the badge. Now, what's interesting is now you could use that badge because it's on blockchain and it's recorded there. Attendees can go to this other site that we built for POAP to verify they own the badge through their wallet, and then request an access token through our Discord bot. If they present that token to the bot, they get access to the room. And we're going to go through a demo of that a little bit later. But some of you might be saying, well, hold on, Mike, this is the same thing we have now, right? Because what's the difference between just running the bot on a server that connects to a centralized database and does the same exact thing? Why the hell are we overcomplicating it with blockchain? Well, I would contend that the centralized database, if it goes away or is manipulated, well, we lose access to who has privileges to what Discord servers or what channels. Basically, all that data goes away if that centralized entity goes away. And what's more is that the middleware doesn't have to actually be run by a company in this case, because all I need to do is verify that their wallet owns a badge or an NFT on blockchain. That's not a company, that's just a library. Anyone can run that, anybody can do that. And that's really the beauty of it, is because this information is stored on a public blockchain, suddenly its use becomes very generic. In fact, what if somebody that owns one of these POAP badges, what if there's a local pub right next to the event, and basically you go into the pub, you scan your wallet address, they have a server in the back, goes on blockchain, looks up and says, yeah, they went to the event, you get a free drink. So suddenly the use of NFTs moves beyond just what it was intended for, could have a whole bunch of new uses because it's publicly available and anyone can access it. It just means you have to read on chain, which also means that the privileges or that metadata could be interpreted differently on different platforms. In one context, I might be in a game where I have armor or a special weapon or something, but over here in another context, it might mean that I have special privileges or roles or admin access or whatever. It's just the same data being reused in different ways, and that's why it's different. It's not locked in and siloed off in one application. It can be used for many different things. And that is a key point I want you to take away. You'll hear a lot of talk about decentralization, and it's bad to have a central server or a database. That's not what it's not what they mean by decentralization here. It means having options. It means, okay, yeah, conveniently, I could just use a centralized service or BUIDLHub's automation bot. I could keep doing that, or I could run it myself. I have the option. And if BUIDLHub goes away or whatever, I can still operate. The data is all out there. That's what it means to be decentralized. Okay, so switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about what it would take to actually start doing something with this tech. Like, what should I, how should I go about this? What steps can I take? So first thing I would say is look at two libraries called Web3 and Ethers.js. Now this is a low level API. This is like way down in the weeds. And you'll want to create abstractions to this. This is the software I was talking about that was changing out from underneath us. So that's a way to get access to the data. And the software requires this provider. And there's a provider called Infura. It's the most popular access point, and it's just an HTTP endpoint where you can query for blockchain data. And these libraries sort of ride on top of Infura to get data. The good thing about Infura is it's free, very easy to get started. Okay, and then another one I would look at is something called the Graph. If you're familiar with GraphQL, it's basically a service that offers pre-indexed data for all these blockchain apps. They don't have all of them, they've got a lot of them, and it's easy to set up your own graph. So I would look at that. And of course, BUIDLHub, because we basically have a no-code middleware solution that makes it really easy to get up to speed, prototype, and try things out. And that's sort of what we're all about. It's middleware between blockchain and traditional apps. And I'm going to go through a demo for the POAP thing. What's cool about this demo, and really the whole exercise, was this is using NFTs to access resources that it's a novel use of blockchain that is not fintech or decentralized finance. It's not tokens for money. It's what we like to support on BUIDLHub, because we believe that enterprise web applications are going to need some of the things that I talked about that are not finance. And already the POAP team has been approached by Bank of America because I guess there's some financial training that's mandatory every year, and they wanted to be able to prove that members of their Bank of America employees were attending these training events. Universities, did you attend class or not? And incentivizing employee participation in big corporate events or something. So this is just a non-money sort of non-financial use of blockchain that I think is compelling. So with that, let's jump into the demo real quick. Let's see. Don't know where my screen went. No, not that one. Let's see. Tab. Okay, so this is BUIDLHub, and I've already created a Discord bot for the event, or for that's running live. And this particular bot is enabled for the proof of attendance protocol event management. And I've created an event, just this ETH Denver 2020 demo event. I've given it an event ID. This ID is what POAP assigns. That project has IDs for all the different badges. So this is a badge that I own, so it'll kind of make the demo go smoother. And then this is a link to the Discord server that I want the users to join, and this is the role I want to assign them if they do in fact own the badge. So let's go over to the POAP chat. Okay, so this is the sort of verification tool that we used, or that we built for POAP. It's basically showing that I have 2 badges. So I'm going to click one of them, and it's saying, okay, let's verify that you actually own this badge. So if I click that, what it's going to do is go full screen on me. Okay, so what it's doing is it's asking me to use my private key to sign some piece of information so that we can verify that I do in fact have the private key attached to an address. So I'll sign that. Now it's reaching out on chain, reading the badge database basically, and saying, does that address actually own the badge? And in this case, I do. So now I have access to the POAP server. What it's telling me is you've got to join the server and send this access code to the chatbot in that room. So now I'll join the Discord server. And then join. And the first thing we'll notice once I join the room is I can only see one chat channel over here on the left, and it's this general user channel. What I want is access to the private channel. So to do that, I am going to, and I don't know why this is full screen on me. Let's try closing that. Okay. Okay, so here's the bot. I'm going to send a message directly to that bot. And clearly I've done this before. So that's the access code I copied from before. And what the bot's going to do is it's going to basically make sure that I have access, or it's going to verify that access code and assign roles to me, that restricted one role. And because now I have the role, I can come back to the room and I see now that I have access to this protected channel. The cool thing about this is because it's on BUIDLHub, there's some other things that we can automate for this bot. So if I ask the bot for help, it will tell me all the commands that it can run. And these commands are all custom They're all like, you can just wire them up without any code, and they query on chain for different things. In this case, like wallet balance. Like if I wanted to see, the balance of this Vitalik.eth address, it's going to reach on chain, figure out what that wallet balance is, and report back to me that he's got 30.63 ETH. So there's a lot of things that can happen here. And again, the interesting thing about all of this is that, let me go to the presentation. We're using bots as sort of this middleware, right? And it just creates a very interesting relationship between chatbots and blockchain. And I think we're going to see more and more of this happening over time on various chat platforms, Slack, Telegram, Discord, whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. And I think at this point, we'll open it to questions.
Thanks, Mike. So if folks have questions, go ahead and type it in the rooms and I'll gather them. I had a couple questions kind of ready. I guess, can you talk a little about the tech behind the product, like what languages, like how long, is it really that easy to set up, things like that?
Mm-hmm. Are you referring to BUIDLHub or just the libraries, the Web3 and Aethers.js libraries?
I was focused more on BUIDLHub, but if you want to talk to all of them, it's up to you.
Yeah, well, that answer is easy for BUIDLHub. There is no code. I mean, you just configure sort of the automations. It's very much like If This Then That or Zapier, very similar, where we're sort of doing the plumbing and you don't have to write code. For the other libraries, I would say crypto and blockchain in general are heavy on JavaScript and Golang. There are Python interfaces and libraries to it. There are some C++ platforms out there like EOS, but the majority of what's going on, you'll find, is JavaScript, Golang are two of the most popular languages used.
It was actually interesting you said the Zapier thing. I mean, are you seeing companies like Zapier move into this space, like provide these kind of things?
I hope not.
Yeah, I figured. I'm just wondering if you're like, what's the other one? If that, then this, or something?
Yeah, if this, then that. So it's not that they can't, but it is outside their lane because of everything I talked about, all of the complications and sort of things you have to overcome to integrate blockchain into your infrastructure. They would have to make a really deep investment to do that. So we've sort of made that our niche. But I was just saying that what we do is very similar to what they're trying to do for traditional web app plumbing or middleware. We're doing that on the blockchain side.
So would the demo that you gave, would that be like the hello world for someone to get started if they wanted to start playing around with this?
So for the platform, we actually have a bunch of templates that you can launch to basically create the flows for you. But hello world for blockchain in general, there are a lot of tutorials out there for I guess what I didn't say is that the smart contract language that's most popular is called Solidity. It's similar. It's actually interesting because I feel like it's a mix between Go and JavaScript. Just the syntax, the way it works, it just feels a lot like both of those languages combined. But yeah, you write the contracts in Solidity, you deploy them on a blockchain, then you interact with them. There's a whole process. And there's a lot of tutorials out there. So I don't know, I feel like the hello world for blockchain is a lot more complicated than hello world for any other language or technology.
What about like the development ecosystem? Like, are there IDEs? Are there widely used like packaging? Kind of like with normal development.
Yes and no. The most popular tool for smart contract development. Again, this is all. I'm talking more about the Ethereum open public blockchain. There's something called Truffle. It does the Solidity compiling, and you can deploy with it. And they have a whole Truffle suite There's also like a local blockchain instance you can use called tool that's called Ganache. It's part of the Truffle suite. So there's a lot that you can do sort of to kick the tires and experiment locally. But when you want to go live, then the tools start to thin out a bit. Truffle is a tool you can deploy with Truffle. Remix is another tool that's an online sort of IDE. But things are a little thin when it comes to sort of very easy to use tools to automate things for you. And certainly that's something that BUIDLHub is going to help with moving forward. But yeah, again, we're really early, so you're going to be at a command line quite a bit.
Yeah, that kind of makes it exciting, though. Kind of feel like you're actually doing something, right? Instead of
Yeah, for some people that are very tech savvy, it's totally natural. It feels fine. But to get to mainstream, to cross that chasm over to mainstream public user, we've got a ways to go yet.
yeah. You had said earlier, you had mentioned like public versus private blockchains, and I was wondering, like in your work and research, and even some of the maybe the customers and use cases that you're dealing with, are you finding, is there any shift or any preference? Are people moving towards private blockchains? And the following that question, one of your key points was, data access. So like if some of these things are built and they're still using private blockchains, I guess you still get a little more widely data access within, people have access to that private blockchain, but you still run into the problem of not being able to allow people later on getting access to data that everyone can get access to. I guess I'm not sure if I worded that right, but I think
no, that's good. Yeah, so I think for again, focusing just on Ethereum, there's a company called Consensus up in New York, and they're very popular with trying to integrate Ethereum with enterprise. And they published an article, I think it was last year, and they basically showed that there's almost a 50-50 share between private or permission chain solutions versus public Ethereum solutions being pursued in the enterprise. I would think that, and what I've seen is that enterprise is leaning more towards the permissioned chains. And the most popular form of that is called Hyperledger Fabric, and it's an IBM product. It's an open source thing, but IBM is pretty much, that's what they sell. And to your point, like companies that go down this path, their concern is privacy, right? Your data is available publicly. Anybody can query it. So I'm certainly not going to be comfortable putting my company like financial records out there for anybody to see what's going on. That wouldn't make any sense. But I think there's going to become this natural balance only because of what we discussed, and you pointed out, if the whole point of blockchain is, or if a primary element of blockchain is availability and transparency, and they're taking that away with this permission chain, what's the point? So I think there's going to be a hybrid, and we're sort of seeing it right now. There's this concept called side chains, which is you've got sort of the main networks running with all the transactions and everything. But then there are these smaller, less secure networks that are faster, and they handle they have a much higher throughput in terms of transaction rate. But what ends up happening is the state of this side chain periodically gets checkpointed and written to the main chain. And I think that is a possibility we're going to see, where enterprises will operate their own private chain internally, but then some of that data will show up in a public record. And the ESOP is a great example of that. I mean, if I leave a company and the token is represented as an ERC20 token, then that comes with me. Like I can leave and trade that token at any time. I don't need to be an employee anymore. If it's only held in a permissioned blockchain, however, I leave, it's gone, right? So I feel like there's going to be this sort of checkpointing going on for certain bits of information within the enterprise.
Makes sense. Yeah, you actually mentioned the Hyperledger. That's interesting. I never knew that IBM was moving into it, but we had a question that actually asked, are you aware of any tools that help facilitate like moving between blockchains, like smart contract code? Like Ethereum, you said, is written in Solidity, I think. Is there something that will help move that to, like, if you want to write there and move it to the IBM blockchain?
Um, I don't know of any tools doing that in an automated way. Most of the blockchains are trying to support Solidity. Some do, but obviously some don't. They want proprietary sort of integration. But yeah, I don't know of any tools that do the translation one for one. I don't even know if, I'm not sure if Hyperledger Fabric supports Solidity. I'm not sure.
So then, okay. So I had just a couple questions, a little less tech, but more just interested. Some folks had asked, like, so are you working in the blockchain tool space, or are you like working to build enterprise apps for people outside the blockchain?
No, we're very much in the tooling space. But just the nature of what we're doing, I think it's going to touch on enterprise integration as well, and doing custom integrations for enterprise. It's just a natural byproduct of what we've built. Like, an enterprise is going to have their existing web app, and they may want to represent that to people that want to automate interactions across blockchain and that application. So it's kind of both. And again, this is sort of exactly what Zapier did early on. It's sort of, they had to live in this world where, well, we're a tool, but we're also sort of this solutions provider. So it's just fuzzy right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was wondering, where did I have it? Hold on, let me get my thought for a second. So one question, where did the name come from for the
Yeah, I was waiting for that one. Okay,
yeah.
so this ecosystem is funny. Early on, there's a term called HODL, HODL,
Mm.
and that term comes from somebody misspelled the word hold in a chat room, and someone basically was on a like a video call or like a I don't know, a podcast or something, and they were basically saying hodl hodl hodl, meaning hold on to your crypto because it's going to go up, it's going to move. Well, it was so funny that it sort of caught on, so now everybody's all about hodling your crypto, but now it's applied to many things, and
Mm.
BUIDL or build was another one. And the reason BUIDL came up was because there was a point in this sort of short-lived history of Ethereum where it was all about token sales. It was all about the ICO, and that's all that was happening. Nobody was building. Nobody was creating anything of interest. So there was the movement around, hey, we need to BUIDL more. We need more like stuff, more apps, more actual solutions. And as soon as I heard that term, I'm like, oh yeah, BUIDLHub, man. I picked that one, got the domain because it just made sense to me.
That makes sense. That makes sense. No, that's cool. All right, like wrapping up, I had a question about so you've been playing in the space for a while, and like we talked about your story a little bit. Do you think that, like, well, one, is it worthwhile? Like, are you enjoying the space? It sounds like you are. Do you think there's room still for a lot of creativity? It seems like we're still kind of in its infancy, right? And maybe for people that are interested in starting their own blockchain tool company or working in that environment, is it hard to get into that? Is it worthwhile? Do you think it's something that folks should be, interested in considering?
Um, so to first part of your question, I love what I'm doing. I mean, this is just so much fun on so many levels, personal level, professional, just because it's so new, because it's an evolving technology and an emerging space, everything is possible. I mean, it just makes it so much more interesting than just banging out web apps or writing enterprise Java code. It's a fascinating space, and DeFi or decentralized finance is sort of an example of that, where you're able to program your bank account. Like, I can route the interest I'm earning on an account to a charity, or I can, chain together certain transactions that will, like, take a flash loan for, some amount, buy some asset, trade it, and pull a profit. It's just, there's just so much going on at the same time, and it's just fascinating to be at the beginning of it. And that's the second part of your question. I think there's tremendous opportunity and room for people with a lot of creativity and patience to get involved, to try different things, and not just finance. I mean, finance is where the focus is. There's a heavy focus on finance right now. But there's so much more coming. You know, there's micro insurance opportunities where you can insure your family reunion, and if it rains and you can prove it rains, you get it like a payout for the insurance. Or it's just, there's so much going on that yeah, it's like Wild Wild West. Jump in, but you do have to be patient, and you do have to sort of be ready for a breakneck speed pace of change, and you have to keep up. It's changing so quickly that standards, these quote unquote standards that are trying to emerge. What will be the standard? What will be the way that we interact with this chain moving forward? You kind of have to keep up with the tech. It's bleeding edge stuff, but yeah, it's very exciting, and I would totally encourage anybody that has any interest in starting down this path, definitely to go for it.
Well, I think we'll end there. I mean, thank you, Mike. I think you did an amazing job. I think you built some amazing things here, and your story is pretty awesome. So I guess, I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions or you'd like to get in touch with Mike, his information's on the meetup page, or I can send something out, but it looks like BUIDLHub.com is a good place to get started. One other thing, O'Reilly has kindly said that I can give away some free ebooks. So if you've gotten this far in the meetup and you're interested in a free ebook, reach out to me, ping me through some channel, either email or meetup.com or something, and I'll put you in touch and you can get a free book, and look for the next event. So again, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you for having us on here and being able to share this information.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
And if there's anything that I can do for you, always let me know, and then we'll make something happen. But thank you, and I hope everyone has a good weekend. Have a good day. Thank you.